You're listening to Two Girls, One Crossword.
I will never forget the time I had to tell you to move your mouth, and you're like, "Oh, I'm practicing my ventriloquism." And I'm like, the amount of times that I had to sync our audio with you doing the countdown without moving your mouth is higher than one.
Sometimes I don't have to move my mouth to talk, but I feel like I do my fingers.
You most often do, but I feel like this time you were like,
I was like 5, 4, 3,
yeah.
2, 1.
And like, you know, not for nothing, but your fingers don't make noise when
Oh,
you put them
see,
down.
because you do it.
But
we do it with sound.
the sound waves, yeah.
Okay.
But every time we count down now, I think about that. Just a little core memory for me.
Just behind the scenes with Chelsea and how I ruined her life. But we're here and we're still making episodes. So
We
welcome
certainly
everyone
are.
to Two Girls, One Crossword. My name is Grace Topinka.
I almost cut you off there because I'm insane. And I'm Chelsea Rowan. This is your favorite weekly Podword Crosscast. We struggle, but ultimately
We come out on top.
we come out on top. And you know what? Our top may not be your top, but it works for us. So
It's pride. We do what we can.
we do what we can. Good morning. It's another beautiful day in paradise.
It is. Shall we get to just jump right into our Polapalooza?
Let's jump into the Polapalooza. I feel like
All right.
if you
Gotta
twist
do
my arm
some-
the right way, I might be chatty today. So let's stay on topic.
Right. Sometimes you just wake up in the mood. I had to do a little maths. 'Cause
Mathematics.
It was an 8-parter. So I asked, what's your favorite flower based off Chelsea's topic last week of the tulip mania in the Netherlands? And the options I gave were rose, tulip, carnation, lily, orchid, peony, sunflower, and daisy.
Oh, well, first of all, what would you pick?
I don't know. I don't really have a favorite flower. I don't think.
I don't
You know.
either. I think like whatever I look at whatever store I'm buying flowers at, I'm like, oh, that looks gorgeous. Like right now, if you're watching on YouTube, I have a vase of carnations. And I really liked them because they were 2 different shades of pink, but they both had like some orange flecks in it. And I was like, that's so pretty. It's like my vibe. I like pinky type things. So,
Right.
you know.
I know. I do feel like I had like a really strong preference because then I feel like that's such be like, oh my gosh, like she knows my favorite flowers and she got me my favorite flowers. But it's like, I like whatever flowers. I'm not going to kill my cat. So definitely not a lily, which no one voted for, by the way.
Ooh.
I don't, yeah.
Is a
don't
lily
really know.
representative of death? I feel like it's like a death flower.
I feel like carnations are the funeral flower.
Are they? This is
I
hilarious.
thought so. I don't know.
Who knows?
I think I like peonies. I'm thinking about like what tattoos of flowers that I like. I like
Peonies.
peonies and chrysanthemums.
Yes.
But yeah, I don't know. I don't really feel strongly either way.
And
but
not having second guesses about whether or not these are carnations. If you come on YouTube and you're like, not that you can really see them from the video, but if you can tell from the video that these are not carnations, do not at me.
they look
okay?
like carnations.
Thank
I think.
you.
But again, I know nothing. So
I will
okay,
stop interrupting you.
The number one choice was tulip with 28% of the vote.
I'm telling you, tulip mania lives on.
Right? Tulip has an effect on people.
It
I like
really
tulips. Fine. I feel like I rarely ever see them like in a vase in a home, you know, or like
I
at
wonder-
the grocery store.
Yeah, I wonder if it's. Remember what my topic said last week? And if you are a gardener, if you like flowers and know more than us, my topic last week, I read that they like last very shortly. Like they don't stick around for a long time. So I wonder if that's part of the reason why they're not particularly like vase flowers. I do know that you can get those tulip specific vases where you have a single stem of a tulip that you can
Right.
kind of.
Those are nice.
They're really nice and they're really ritzy feeling. But I wonder if they're ritzy feeling because it's tulips. I don't know. If you know more, let us know. Please. I beg you. I beg you.
In second place, 21% of the vote was a sunflower.
A sunflower. I do like sunflowers. I like sunflower seeds.
I like sunflowers too. They can get so big though. They're kind of like intimidating in a way. Like if you ever just see one like on the sidewalk, sometimes some people in Chicago have them in their front yard. And I'm like, whoa.
Oh,
that flower's
yeah.
like bigger than I am.
A lot of the like the corner garden plots are like community garden plots in the neighborhoods around us. And in one of the previous neighbors that I lived in, like almost all 4 of the plots on each of the corners had sunflowers. And I'm telling you, like these sunflower heads were like bigger than mine, like massive.
That makes me feel a little weird. I don't know. I just don't feel like flowers should be that big. Kind of like gives me the heebie-jeebies.
It's like Jurassic almost, like prehistoric or very dinosaur feeling. Like the stems were like thicker than my leg, you know? You're
right?
Like,
like that doesn't feel right to me.
It's like, who let this monstrosity get to this size?
Okay, tied in 3rd place was the orchid and the peony.
Orchids are nice. We should go to the botanic gardens to see the orchid room.
Right. Well, orchids are kind of cool because they can like they die and come back to life.
Yeah.
Because they're not just like in a, you know, vase.
A vase. But a cut flower.
Yeah. I can't really have that many flowers because my cat tries to lick them and he throws up.
Yeah. It's a bad time.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then and the peony, which I like the tattoo of a peony, so yeah. I don't really know what it looks like in real life. Okay, and then it's tied in 4th place was a rose and a carnation.
Okay, I do like a rose. I'm just gonna say it. I like a rose.
A single red rose.
Mm-hmm.
And then in last place with 6% of the vote was daisy. I feel like daisies are cute. I mean, they're summery. They're fun.
Yeah, of course. I'm like,
they come in a lot of.
What does a daisy look like?
Nice colors. They're kind of.
Is it sort of like a sunflower, but much smaller?
Yes. They're kind of like when you draw a flower, you know?
Oh,
like
you draw on a daisy.
Drawer, I feel like that's like a daisy. Mm. Just very simple.
I have a violet on my arm, a tattoo I just remembered. I'm like, thinking about floral tattoos. I was like, oh, I have a violet. Anyway.
Violet, you're turning violet.
Violet, you're turning violet. And if your fave flower was not included on this list, you can write to us and tell us what your fave flower was, and it'll get lost on the internet. And
someone commented saying daffodil, harbinger of spring.
Oh, a daffodil is pretty.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many options.
It's true. When I think of daffodil, I think of Alice in Wonderland.
Right,
the daffodils from the animated Alice in Wonderland.
Mm. What about the poppies from Wizard of Oz?
I think poppies are beautiful. Crazy about the opium thing.
Right. But
what can you do?
Well, it's nature. That's flowers for you.
Yeah, it's nature.
Shall we get into our heights and shites?
Let's get into the heights and shites.
Which really are just more heights these days.
I do have a shite today.
Oh, excellent.
Should I start with the shite just to kind of get us a little riled up?
Starting a low. No, we can get higher from there.
Okay, cool. So this is like, even though it is a shite, I'm like stretching it because I'm not trying to drag this constructor in any way, but you know, just something that I wanted to bring up and I want to ask Grace her opinion. So I'm assuming you did not do the Sunday, June 4th New York Times.
You are correct.
Okay. Good puzzle. I enjoyed the puzzle. Very good, by Rafael Musa. The theme was pride. When you open the puzzle, you see the rainbow throughout the grid online. I'm actually curious if you did the puzzle like in the newspaper, did it have the colors printed for the pride flag? Let me know.
Oh yeah, that is interesting. I saw it on Twitter, like a screenshot of it.
Okay, I was excited. I was like, "Oh my god, a pride, puzzle." You and I like themed puzzles, first of all. We love that stuff. Especially themes like with colors in the grid or like shapes or something. Like we're an easy sell on those. So I was excited. The revealer was 57 across with 58 across. What's represented by this puzzled colored stripes, and across the two answers was pride and then flag. Amazing. The bone that I have to pick with this puzzle is that there was really no like queer trivia within the puzzle at all. Okay. Mm-hmm. And the colored flag of the colors in the puzzle, those clues had nothing to do with pride. And I was kind of like, what an interesting theme to not include any sort of queer history, queer trivia, or, like the most queer we got was Lil Nas X was in the puzzle. You know what I mean? Like that was like, whatever. So the way that it worked is each color has an answer for it, but it's not related to the actual color of the stripe. The clue that sits next to the colored stripe has a colored clue answer. For instance, 17 across was the color red, and the clue was intermittently, and the answer was on and off. So that was what was sitting in the red stripe. And you're like, okay. 18 across, which sits next to 17 across, was they're right on an election map or a description of 17 across. And the answer is red states. So it says red states, but red states has nothing to do with pride unless you're thinking about how the red states are trying to...
States that vote against...
LGBTQIA people, exactly. Yeah. Another example, 37 across, Olympic no-no. Olympics no-nos. And the answer was steroids, and this was across the color orange. And then 33 across, screwdriver component or a description of 37 across was orange juice. And like juice is obviously slang for steroids. I think there's more connecting these clues than just whatever. But the point being that you could have used the stripes to talk about the colors of the pride flag or to give interesting, history about pride and, raise LGBTQI awareness. Especially in these Times. Yeah, especially in troubling times. I feel like if this was a New Yorker, that's what would have happened, but it wasn't.
The New Yorker has like queer clues, like just in their regular
baseline
puzzles. I hate to even say like queer clues too, because then that makes it seem like that's different than any other type of trivia, just because the answer happens to be someone who is queer.
This puzzle felt strangely devoid of anything queer.
Yeah.
Considering it was a pride puzzle.
Yeah.
And that's, we really don't do hits and shits, or we don't do shits that much anymore because we try to be more like understanding of a constructor. And also we understand how difficult it is now to construct a puzzle. And it usually...
that the editors change stuff too. Like it's not all in the constructor.
Exactly. But, this was one of the ones I was kind of like, sad.
Yeah.
Opportunity missed. That's not to say that I didn't learn some things, or one across in this puzzle. Blank's number, cognitive limit to how many relationships a person can maintain. And the answer is Dunbar, so Dunbar's number. So I looked this up. I didn't really do too much, but I thought this was interesting. This is from Wikipedia. Dunbar's number is a suggested cognitive limit to the number of people with whom one can maintain stable social relationships in which an individual knows who each person is and how each person relates to the other person. I'd never heard of that, but that's interesting.
What's the number?
I think it's different per person, dependent on your brain size. That's as far as I got when I was looking, and I was like, I don't have time to dig into this, but I was like, that's
that is
interesting.
Cool.
Yeah.
I wonder, does it count like your family too?
Right. That's a good question. I know that I have like a very limited social battery, but I don't know if that's...
You got a low Dunbar number? That's what you should just tell people, be like, I got a low Dunbar number.
I should. I'll use that as my excuse. This was a throwback to one of Grace's topics, 62 across. I just thought this was funny because you basically corrected a clue when you did your puzzle. So I was like, I want to know if this is true. 12th most common street name per the U.S. Census Bureau. And the answer was Maple. And I'm like, that sounds like it could be right. But when Grace did her topic on street names, the clue that was in the puzzle that she got her topic from was wrong, according to her research.
Right. And, there's new street names popping up all the time. That sounds right, because, like, trees is one of the most, or I think tree is the most popular category of, street names. So I believe it.
Yeah. And basically all the streets in my town growing up were tree names of some sort. If it wasn't, like, Main Street, it was a tree name. I grew up on a tree street.
Right.
And that's just me doing crazy New Jersey things. That's what I have from that puzzle.
Well, let's see. I did The Friday New Yorker by Ella Dershowitz, and it's so interesting. On the summary page, it says Ella Dershowitz and Ella Dershowitz. So I was like, what is this? Does she have like a mom with the same name? But then when I went to the actual puzzle, at the bottom it said Ella and Amy Lucido. So I don't know. I'm guessing it was also Amy, who had another puzzle in the New Yorker that I did later in the week. But
yes,
there are a couple that I liked from that one. 14 across, 2 for Rugrats Chucky Finster. The answer was age. And yes, cute. I knew that. I know all their ages. 23 across. Princess. Oh, no. Sorry. That's not one. 58 across. Oscillating exercise device of infomercial fame, or how to arrive at the 4 strings of circled letters in this puzzle. So this was the revealer.
Okay.
And the answer was shake weight, which is just kind of funny because that's like a meme,
Yes.
thing. But so in the clue, there would be like across answers with circled letters all next to each other. For example, 17 across, the question was stat monitored by hay fever sufferers, and the answer was pollen count. So NCOW was circled, and then if you rearrange those, it's ounce. So it's a shake weight. Like that's how kind of they all were. So 35 across, that must be a joke. Answer was you're not serious. And the ENOTS was circled, and then that if you shake it around, it spells stone. So it was all like weights shifted around.
Did you ever have a shake weight or know anybody with a shake weight?
I feel like I did know someone with a shake weight, but no, I never had one.
We had one at our, like the house we lived in. There were 6 of us that lived there in college, and or was it? Now the memories are fading, but it was a party foul thing. You had to do the shake weight as like a party foul, like because we would party way too much. But yeah,
amazing. And then I also like 67 across, skeevy sorts slangily, and the answer was creepos.
Creepos, nice. Is that what you have from that puzzle?
Yes.
I'm gonna keep us on the New York Times.
Sorry.
You're good. I'm going to keep us on the New York Times, the Friday, June 2nd New York Times by John Eubank. 1 across, and I'm sorry if this is derogatory, but I'm going to say it anyway because it was in the New York Times. Don't come for me. But I just thought this was funny. Police officers in British slang, and the answer is plods. We have plenty of slang here for police officers in the U.S., and so I'm like, I read this and I was like, this can't be derogatory. Like, I'm not going to make people upset by saying this on air, am I? Oh, well, I did anyway. But I just thought that was funny. I was like, oh, you learn something new every day. Plods.
I love that.
Yes, agree. 23 across. Something outstanding in its field? Question mark.
A scarecrow.
That would have been a perfect answer. It was stalk. You were in the right, you got the trick. 56 across. General Motor? Question mark.
I don't know.
Armored car.
Very
good. 7 down. It's an uphill climb from here, and the answer is Everest Base Camp.
There's all this stuff about Everest coming out now. Like,
oh yeah,
some woman had needed a rescue mission, and these other people who were climbing like paid a Sherpa $10,000 to go rescue her, and he did. And then the other climbers like paid the Sherpa, but one of the climbers like, the lady hasn't paid me for paying the Sherpa. But the whole thing. Then now I feel like, well, people have always known this, but I feel like now it's on TikTok. It's really coming out now about how like messed up the whole Everest climbing industry is, and how it's basically, someone's like, it's kind of poetic that there's like a mountain of dead millionaires.
Yes.
Like, because it's so, I mean, you don't have to be a millionaire, but it's extremely expensive. I mean, at least $50,000 to climb.
Right.
Usually more, I think. People are saying the average is like $100,000 now to spend to go. And
that's crazy.
People die, and the problem, like, why someone was like, I can't believe like the Sherpa like wouldn't save the lady unless he was paid $10,000, and people were like, it's like a death mission to go and save someone because it's like so difficult. But I heard that they actually prefer to be called porters. Sherpa is like anyone who lives in that area, but the people who work on the mountain are porters, but they are more acclimated to the, altitude, but porters still die all the time on Mount Everest as well.
Yeah. They obviously they have more experience than like the average Joe climbing, and like they're more acclimated to the altitude, but it's just as dangerous for Joe Schmo from New York City to climb Mount Everest as it is for a porter. It's not like they have some sort of superpower that you don't. Of course they're going to want you to pay them because they might be dying up there with that woman too.
Yeah. And I also think when you climb, you have to sign a contract saying that you're like, if you go off the trail or whatever, like you might not be saved because it's just like too difficult to save people. But anyways, if you want to listen, Chelsea did a really interesting topic on it. So if you want to listen to that, ask us what the episode is because I don't remember off the top of my head.
Well, I was remembering one of our very, very early episodes. It was around the time in, I think, was it 2019 when we started the podcast or 2018? I cannot remember. But it was around the time when like all this stuff was coming out where people were lining up. There's like huge queues to get to the top. Happening. And it's still happening. But I remember when that like first, it was coming back to like public consciousness. And one of our opening bits for one of our very early episodes, like episode 2 or 3, I think, was about the lines to get up to the top of Everest. And it's like, yeah, all these like really rich white people are just paying to like stand in the line and maybe die. It's like, why are you doing this? Yeah. Well, teach their own, right?
Oh yeah, I think we were like, you're paying $50,000 to die at the top of Mount Everest. You could die down here for free.
I mean, honestly, to each their own, but I feel like there's a lot to be said about.
There's definitely a lot going on there, and a lot of like, I mean, it's very complicated situation. People are like, the porters are being exploited, but they also, they make a lot of money being porters compared to the average salary.
Yeah.
In Nepal. So what are like they're, you're supporting your family. It's there's a lot of different factors that have created what it is today.
I had to read that stupid Everest book in the Krakauer book. The one where he writes about climbing to Everest. And I had to read it in like 7th or 8th grade. Anyway, I feel like there are going to be other people that are listening to this that when I say like John Krakauer, I think is the author, they're going to know what book this was. God, I hated it because it stressed me out. And after reading that book, I was like, why is anybody doing this? Anyway, it's fine. It's like, that's where my anxiety was born from reading that book. But that's what I have. Wait, that's all I have from that puzzle. You feel free to take over.
Right. I did the Tuesday, June 6th New Yorker by Wina Liu. 6 across, Parliament members, ? And the answer was owls, because like a group of owls is called a parliament.
Cute. I thought you were going to talk about cigarettes.
No. 15 across, place where both employees and clients might get tips. The answer is nail salon.
Cute. I want to get my nails done, by the way.
Well, you should. I don't, because I'm saving money because my cat is like deathly ill. And he costs me like $1 million every week. Okay. 18 across, means of gaining extra abilities in a video game. Cheat code, which reminds me of the Sims topic that I did.
Of course.
Last time. 25 across, it's long and has special characters. The answer was strong password.
That's a good clue. I like that.
3 down, 1 rolling around in salt, perhaps. Winter tire.
Nice.
52 down, initials that might accompany lipstick marks. The answer is swak, sealed with a kiss.
Oh, I was like, XOXO. Nice. I guess XOXO is not initials, technically.
Yeah, I don't know. Does it mean hugs and kisses? I don't know.
Yeah, I haven't a clue. We'll have to figure it out.
No way to know.
No way to know. Is that what you have from that puzzle?
Yes.
I'll stick at the New Yorker, the Monday, June 5th New Yorker by Natan Last. I liked 14 across, quote, I won't judge. The answer was, you do you. Thought that was funny. 32 across, board flipper, perhaps. Sore loser. I just liked sore loser. And it's like, if you ever play a game with somebody and they are a board flipper, red flag. Red flag. This one's for you, Grace. 41 across. Name on the side of the Sky Cycle X2 rocket used in an attempted jump over the Snake River Canyon. And the answer is evil, because Evil has tried to jump. Well, he had tried to jump over a couple canyons or whatever. I think these next 2 clues were my favorite just because of the way that they were positioned over. Like, one was stacked on top of each other, and they're not necessarily related, but I was like, this is funny because I see TikToks about these all the time. 49 across, Seinfeldian fashion sense. And the answer is normcore, which is funny. And I do love normcore. But it was sitting on top of 51 across, excessively quaint. And the answer is twee, which is another type of fashion sense. Like, think Zooey Deschanel and 500 Days of Summer, like twee. So I just like that normcore was sitting over top of twee. It was very cute. And that's what I have from that puzzle.
I feel like
You done?
I'm done.
All right, I'll just talk about the Amy Lucida one and I'll be done, because you talked about another Amy one, but this is the Amy puzzle that you did by yourself, the Wednesday, June 7th New Yorker. One across, pain of the stomach or heart, perhaps. Ache. Yes. This is great. 16 across, do a whole lot of nothing. The answer was fart around. Very good. 19 across, favorite person say, but favorite is spelled with a U, O-U-R-I-T, which is the key here. And the answer is best mate instead of best friend. 54 across, sources of a low level odor, question mark. Stinky feet.
Oh my God.
And there are others, and Amy's puzzles are the ones that we can just basically read from top to bottom and be like, this is a good one, this is a good one, this is a good one. It was a good week for puzzles.
Yeah.
I think.
It was.
Shall
we flip our coin?
I'm going to flip the coin now.
We really are chatty today.
Yeah, we really are. Okay. I'm flipping the coin now. Tails!
Oh, little me. All right.
Little Grace.
My clue is from the June 4th Washington Post Sunday puzzle by Evan Bernholz. 41 across, number of blots in the Rorschach ink blot test.
Oh, I don't know.
The answer is 10.
Okay.
There's 10, and it's not like blots on paper. Like, there's 10 different images in the Rorschach test, which I didn't realize either. I thought it was just like a random, like, it was all random, but no, they're specifically picked out. And I'm going to talk about the Rorschach ink blot test. And I do have trouble pronouncing that word, so if I mess up, the correct pronunciation is Rorschach.
Okay.
But sometimes I stumble, so
I would say Rorschach, so don't beat yourself up about it.
Right. Well, that's just from the one thing I read online. It said it was like roar like a lion and then shock like a shockwave. So
got it.
All right. The Rorschach test, probably one of the most famous forms of psychological tests, thanks to its prevalence in movies and TV shows, right? You see it like all the time. I think a lot of people are familiar with it because they've seen it in a movie, not because they actually know anyone who's taken it or has taken it themselves, but
exactly.
Let's talk about it. I got most of my information from 2 articles, one in The Guardian called Can We Trust the Rorschach Test by Damien Searles, and one from Simply Psychology called Rorschach Inkblot Test Definition, History, and Interpretation by Mia Bell Frothingham.
These titles are so snappy sometimes.
I know, sometimes it's like you guys need to tighten it up a bit.
Tighten it up.
But to be fair, the Simply Psychology was more just like an informational... it wasn't like a true article.
Of course.
All right, so let's talk about the history. The idea that you could use someone's interpretation of an ambiguous design to like figure something out about their personality did not start with the Rorschach test. In fact, our friend Alfred Binet, who helped create the IQ test, thought about using ink blots as a way to test creativity.
Okay.
He didn't end up doing it, but if you do want to learn more about the IQ test and Mensa and how the IQ test is also kind of bunk, you can listen to episode 144, Come Out on Top.
All right.
But the Rorschach test was the first systematic approach of its kind. It was developed in 1921 by a Swiss psychologist named Hermann Rorschach. So it was relatively recent. Like, Hermann had 2 kids, and one of them died in like 2020, and the other one died in 2006.
Wow. Okay.
One of Hermann's favorite games to play as a child was Klexography, which involved... like, you would create an ink blot, and then you would develop story. You would, like, draw around it, like, and then develop a story or a poem that had to do with what it was. So, in fact, he loved this game so much that his childhood friends nicknamed him Klex, which is the German word for ink blot.
That is hilarious.
Right. So Klex, aka Herman, kept this interest into adulthood. He eventually became a psychologist and he was working at a psychiatric hospital in Switzerland. He studied patients and control subjects with hundreds of hand-drawn blots, or like hand-created blots. And he noticed that people with schizophrenia responded to the blots differently from patients with other diagnoses or disorders. So then he developed a systematic approach using ink blots as a testing tool to evaluate like this type of, cognition, personality traits, and to diagnose certain psychological disorders, mainly schizophrenia.
Okay.
So out of the hundreds of blots he made and used in his research, he narrowed it down to 15 to put in his book, Psychodiagnostic. For 2 years, he was trying to get this book published, but he had no takers. One of the articles I read said that it was very expensive to print these books because the ink blots, to print an ink blot, because it took a lot of ink, whatever. So finally, in 1921, a publisher said that they were willing to publish the book, but it could only be 10 ink blots. Hence, why there's 10 ink blots in the Rorschach test as referenced in the crossword clue.
Okay.
So it's a set of 10. So no one knows how he determined which blots to use out of the hundreds. And there's not a lot of notes about how he created the blots, the research
around it,
on why he chose what he chose. So but he basically chose these 10, published the book, and then sadly Herman died a year after the book was published from a ruptured appendix at the age of 37. So
wow,
he didn't really even get to see it become
what it is now.
Right. And he originally created the test mostly to diagnose schizophrenia, but since the 1930s, it was used more as a personality test.
Okay.
After his death, the test was improved by other scientists, including a man named John Exner. Exner developed a standardized system of interpretation. The Exner system of scoring, formerly known as the comprehensive system, was published in 1974 and is now the standard method of administering and scoring the test. So there was a lot. I mean, some of the stuff I was reading about the test, I was like, I don't understand this. It takes a really long time to be able to interpret Rorschach test results. So,
okay.
You have to be researching it for years to be someone who can interpret results. So there's no way I can explain it over the podcast. But basically a lot of different scientists were working on it. They finally came out with a standardized system of, scoring someone's answers. But so let's go into how the test is administered. So there's 10 official ink blots, each printed on separate white cards. 5 ink blots are black and gray. 2 are black, gray, and have red in them. And then 3 are multicolored without any black at all.
Oh,
They're kind of they kind of look like tie-dye.
Okay.
During administration, the examiner will sit next to you, and this helps them see what you see. And then these are the steps how the test is taken. 1, the examiner presents you 1 card at a time and asks you, what might this be? 2, you give a response. You're free to interpret the image however you want. You can take however long you want to interpret each card, and you can give as many responses as you want. You can also hold the cards in any position, whether it's upside down or sideways. Step 3, your examiner records everything you say, no matter how trivial. They'll note the time it takes you for each response, the position the card is being held, your emotional expressions, etc. during the test. And step 4, once you go through all the ink blots once, your examiner will take you through each ink blot a second time. The goal of this is not to get new information, but to help your examiner see what you see. They'll ask you to identify where you see what you originally saw and what features made it look like that. So on average, it takes 1.5 hours to administer and score the test. So it takes kind of a while. And how's it scored? There's a couple different things it's scored on. One, based on what you see, this is called the content. So different categories of content is if you see a whole human, if you see a human detail, like just an ear or just a hand, if you see a human detail that's fictional or mythological, if you see an animal detail, sex, or nature.
Okay.
And then there's location, or how much of the ink blot you use to answer the question. D is marked if a commonly described part of the blot was used. DD is marked if an uncommonly described or unusual detail was used. So basically they're comparing your interpretations to the general population.
Got it.
S is if the white space in the background was used, and W is if the whole ink blot was used to answer the question. The next set of criteria is the determinants, or what the examiner considers the reasons why you see what you see. For example, you might say you see a flower on one of the cards because it's red. So color would be the determinant of that answer. So the 6 broad categories of determinants are color, form, movement, pairs and reflections, and shadings. But these are further broken down into 26 categories, and more than one can be used in a single response. So interpreting these results is like extremely complex. In addition to the scores themselves, the psychologist is also looking at the behaviors expressed while taking the test. Like if you had quick responses, maybe that could indicate a personality that is comfortable in social situations. That seems a little too easy. And then they also look to see if you have a similar response to other people. But what's interesting is that they can only, like, these normal responses change based on where you are. So, for example, Europeans almost never talk about texture as one of their determinants, though it is quite common in the US to do that.
Interesting.
In France, card 8 is often seen as a chameleon, but in the US, that would be like an extremely unusual response to
Interesting.
have. In Scandinavia, card 2 is often seen as a Christmas elf.
Cute.
Excuse me. But just specifically in Scandinavia. So kind of like it changes based on, where you are.
Which I think I can understand why that might be true. Right.
So is this test legit? A lot of people think that it's pseudoscience, similar to a lot of personality tests. There's a couple reasons why people don't like it. Firstly, there wasn't a universal scoring system until 1974 with John Exner, and even then, some experts caution against the Exner system, saying that it might lead to overdiagnosing psychotic disorders. It also lacks reliability, meaning that you can get the same result, or it lacks reliability, meaning that you can get different results from the same person giving the same response. It all depends on how the examiner interprets their response. It's extremely subjective based on the examiner. There is some newer research that points to it actually being able to determine schizophrenia specifically, which was Herman's initial use for it.
Yeah.
But potentially also Alzheimer's.
Interesting.
And while the test is less popular in the US, apparently according to this article, it is still pretty popular in Argentina and Japan.
Okay.
So, some fun facts about the test.
Yes.
Herman developed the 10 blots with a structured disorder. So the cards might appear messy. He felt like they couldn't appear too perfect because they couldn't present as deliberately crafted. Otherwise,
this is deliberately a butterfly or whatever.
Right. And then he also omitted any perceptible brush strokes or other indications that they had been handmade. They're all symmetrical, making them more pleasing to the eye, but also making it fair to left-handed people. That way, it's, the test is the same.
Interesting.
This is some initial interpreting that's out there. If you see a lot of food, then that might mean you are unusually dependent in relationships. If you saw a lot of sex, then that might point to schizophrenia. Depression was supposed to improve the sharpness of the forms that you see, while elation dulls it. So Herman thought that people were depressed because their perception is too good. They're too aware of their own shortcomings and responsibility for their failures.
Well, I feel like, a lot of... yeah.
Yeah, they might be onto something. If you see images in motion, then that might point to you being creative. But in Herman's initial research, he decided that the ink blot test could not be used on teenagers as they had too much in common with the clinically insane.
Oh my God. Okay.
Right. Okay. In Maya Angelou's memoir, she says she had to take a Rorschach test before she was allowed to become a San Francisco streetcar conductor.
That's interesting.
Sarah Lawrence College, which is the college that had that sex cult that the Hulu documentary came out about, but it's a very artsy, fartsy, liberal, creative, college. But they used to administer the test to all incoming freshmen, citing a time where freshmen had seemed, quote, normal, but her Rorschach test set off some red flags. And when they looked into her more, they saw that she had once gone after her sister with a knife.
Oh.
There are more stories about the Rorschach test like this. Like, if you get into really reading about, like, people who defend the Rorschach test, there's stories where people are seemingly very well adjusted, but they scored weirdly on the test, and then later you find out that they are extremely disturbed. So that might be why the test has, like, continued to live on, because there are, like, psychologists who maybe were really skeptical, but then they saw firsthand that the test can reveal things that aren't easily perceptible. Like, there's one popular story that goes around of a guy he was, like, gonna work out of school. He took a Rorschach test, and the psychologist was like, there's something, like, the Rorschach test makes me think that he might be unstable. I don't think you should be working with kids. But, like, couldn't give any more information other than that. And he seemed, like, otherwise, you know, well adjusted, but they didn't end up letting him work there. And then years later, that psychologist got a call from another psychiatrist who's like, I'm seeing this one patient. Like, I just want to ask you, you know, about the Rorschach test or whatever. It came out that the guy was, like, a pedophile. And, you know, he eventually got caught or whatever. He was at a different psychiatrist who called back to this original one who, like, saw something weird on the Rorschach test. So there's, like, weird stories like that, of course,
right.
You know. I don't know.
I mean, I don't know much about the Rorschach test other than what you're telling me right now, but, like, I don't think it's far-fetched to assume or to guess that people who have something going on perceive reality different than, say, people who don't have something going on. In the same way that neurodivergent people see or understand the world differently than neurotypical people. Do you know what I mean? Like,
right. It's more about what you see and, like, what you see with your eyes versus, like, how you perceive things, which brings me to the final quote that I'm going to end with.
Okay.
From the Guardian article. In principle, the Rorschach test rests on one basic premise. Seeing is an act not just of the eye, but of the mind, and not just of the visual cortex or some other isolated part of the brain, but of the whole person. If that is true, a visual task that calls upon enough of our perceptual powers will reveal the mind at work.
Interesting. So. This reminds me of two of your other topics. The color topic.
Right.
And the translation topic. Or bilingual topic, you know? How differently perception of the world can be dependent on various factors, whether it's some sort of mental thing going on or cultural or whatever. The mind is insane. So something like the Rorschach test being able to potentially pick up on some, like, underlying banana shit doesn't seem totally unlikely to me.
Right. I mean, I don't think it's, like, a lot of people said, like, it often misdiagnosed, like, depression. Like, I feel like maybe with that stuff, you know, it's not a sure thing, but I do feel like it could give, you know, a psychologist a look into something. But weirdly, it's used a lot in, like, child custody court cases.
That's so weird.
Yeah. I mean, it's still used in court sometimes. So it's like, it's, on one hand, like, it's seen as legitimate in a lot of ways, but I feel like because there's not, like, enough proof, like, you know, actual research done on a control group, like, saying it's right 100% of the time, that it's not reliable. Right. But there's more research coming out about it that, like, yeah, maybe they say Alzheimer's patients, like, they won't see humans in a lot of the blots, which is, like, a really common thing to see. But by the way, yes, all the blots are online, even though they're not supposed to be. Like, I think obviously they didn't have internet back then, but they aren't supposed to be online because you're really not supposed to be, like, looking at it before, you know, if you ever take a test. Yeah. Because you don't want to see, like, oh, what do other people see? So sorry, I kind of spoiled that for there's some of y'all out there, but you'll definitely see the chameleon now. Yeah, even if you're not in France, but
I've already had my psychological analyzing done. I don't think I'll be taking the Rorschach anytime soon. So
right. But it's so interesting. The brain.
The brain, right? Grace does all these topics on the brain and how, depending on where you are, you might perceive the world differently. So if you're interested in the color topic or the translation topic, the bilingual topic, she did also do a translation topic, but just let us know.
The bilingual topic is more cerebral. Let us know. Point you in the right direction.
More brainy. Okay, cool. Shall we move on to my topic?
Yes, let's.
Let's do it. My topic comes from the Friday, June 2nd New York Times puzzle by John Eubank. 25 down. Attendance at a Saturnalia. And the answer is cupbearer. We're going to be talking about Saturnalia today.
Okay.
Does that ring a bell to you at all? Saturnalia.
Yes, it does. I feel like it's come up in these different, like,
Holiday
we've done
topics.
a lot of pagan
yes
holidays that have been turned into Christian holidays.
100%. The big one Grace did was episode 67, Tradition, Flip It, and Reverse It, where she talks about Christmas or like pagan holidays that
the winter solstice, basically.
That basically became kind of Christian traditions. And Saturnalia comes up in that topic a little bit. But I'm going to be talking specifically about Saturnalia, the holiday. Mm-hmm. And it does sort of intersect a little bit with the topics from episode 67. So if you're interested in learning more about like pagan holidays, listen to episode 167, or sorry, not 167, just plain old 67.
Oh, go way back.
We're going way back there. So far back that when I went into I like searched Saturnalia and all of like our research document to see like, did we, because this seemed familiar, did we do this? And nothing came up. And I was like, that's really weird. I know that we did a topic on this potentially, but was in one of the ones that I accidentally deleted the research from. So that's on me. So I went back and I listened to the episode and I was like, okay, I can do this topic. It's not like she did a topic on Saturnalia. Okay. Anyway. Saturnalia was an ancient Roman festival and holiday in honor of the god Saturn. It was originally held on one day, December 17th of the Julian calendar. We've done a topic on calendars as well. If you're curious, let us know. But later it was expanded to multiple days of festivities all the way through December 23rd. So through through ancient Roman history, Saturnalia has gone from 1 day to 2 days, back to 1 day to 3 days, all the way to 7 days, back to 2 days. It's like it flexed quite a lot depending on who was ruling at the time. Mm-hmm. But I think it spent a lot of time as 3 days and then a lot of time as a 7-day festival. But what was Saturnalia all about? Firstly, Saturnalia was the most popular holiday on the ancient Roman calendar. Why was that? Saturnalia was a festival to honor the god Saturn, which was an agricultural deity who was said to have ruled over the world during the Greek Golden Age. Okay, what the hell does that mean? So the concept of the Greek Golden Age comes from Hesiod's 800-line epic poem called Works and Days. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing Hesiod wrong, but that's the phonetic way to do it. In this account from Hesiod's poem, the 5 ages of man, one of which is the Golden Age, was covered. So Hesiod talks about a bunch of different ages, specifically 5 ages of man and like 2 other ages of something else. One of the ages of man is called the Golden Age. And so a lot of times if you're looking into like Greek or Roman history or traditions, you'll see a lot of things about the Golden Age. And they're not talking about like, oh, the Golden Age when things were just better. They're referencing Hesiod's definition of the Golden Age, which was a specific period in time, quote unquote specific. Anyway, according to Hesiod, the Golden Age was the mythical first period of man. The people of the Golden Age were formed by or for the Titan Cronus, whom the Romans called Saturn. So we're talking about Greek traditions right now, but Saturnalia is a Roman tradition. They're symbiotic. They're intertwining, right? So Cronus, the Titan Cronus, is Saturn. So stick with me here. The Golden Age. Mortals lived like gods. They never knew anything about sorrow or toil. When they died, it was as if they were falling asleep. No one worked or grew unhappy. Spring never ended. And then when people did die, they became daemons, which it's a Greek word that later became demons, who roamed the earth. And then the Golden Age ended when Zeus and the other gods from Zeus's generation, basically the kids of the Titans, overthrew the Titans, which if you are a millennial, then you would know that Zeus overcame the Titans because you've seen Hercules and that incredible animation sequence when they overcame the Titans. Anyway, so the Golden Age was like the time before Zeus, when things were perfect. And Saturnalia was a way to celebrate this mythical period of perfection by honoring the god Saturn.
Sounds nice.
It really does. The Greeks actually had their own equivalent of this festival called Chronia, because remember, Cronus is the Greek version of Saturn. So Chronia is the name of the holiday for the Greeks, and it was actually celebrated sometime between July and August of a totally different calendar system, rather than Saturnalia being celebrated in midwinter. Saturn as a god was considered a righteous and benevolent ruler. He taught the inhabitants of his land, geographically we're in Italy, imagine, he taught them about agriculture, laws, and once the Golden Age ended, people kept his memory alive through the celebration of Saturnalia. There are actually some writings that suggest that Saturn was less of a deity and more of like a real king. Justinus, in his writing Epitome of Pompeius Trogus, says, quote, "The first inhabitants of Italy were the Aborigines, whose king, Saturnus, is said to have been a man of such extraordinary justice that no one was a slave in his reign or had any private property, but all things were common to all and undivided as one estate for the use of everyone. In memory of which way of life it has been ordered that at the Saturnalia slaves should everywhere sit down with their masters at the entertainment, the rank of all being made equal." End quote.
That sounds kind of nice.
I mean, the Golden Age sounds pretty freaking awesome, right? I'm here for it. So how was Saturnalia celebrated? This Justinus quote that I just read kind of gives you a little bit of a sneak peek to how Saturnalia was celebrated, but let's get into some more specifics. Originally, Saturnalia started as a farming ritual where farmers would offer gifts and sacrifices to the gods in celebration of the winter solstice and the winter planting season. Remember, Saturn is the god of agriculture, so like this was happening around midwinter. It was like an agricultural thing, like we need to plant things to stay alive. Praise be to Saturn. These early rituals eventually morphed into a holiday with a real name, Saturnalia. So Saturnalia as like a actual festival was always kicked off with a religious ceremony in the temple of Saturn. Like wherever you might have lived, there was probably a temple of Saturn or some sort of something similar. In Rome, the temple of Saturn was constructed in the 4th century CE and served as the ceremonial center for Saturnalia celebrations. On the first day of the festivities, a young pig would often be publicly sacrificed at the temple. There's also a statue of Saturn in the temple. Traditionally had wooden or rather woolen bonds around its hands and feet, but during Saturnalia, those bonds were loosened to symbolize the god's liberation. The celebration or the ceremony was then followed by a free public banquet open to all, with businesses and courts and schools closed so everyone could take part. Saturnalia was a time of merrymaking, like most big festivals, but it was also a time where rigid social norms were relaxed or even inverted. So if we remember the Justinus quote from a little bit ago, it talks about how enslaved people were supposed to be given time off during Saturnalia and to sit at the same table as their masters, and that was true. That's what happened during Saturnalia. I'm going to go through a couple of these little traditions. People decorated their homes with wreaths and other greenery. Interesting. Strict Roman dress codes were overturned, so instead of wearing the formal toga, Romans of all ranks would put on a comfortable and colorful dinner dress that was normally reserved for like private dinners. These were called synthesis. And everyone would wear a freedman's cap, which was like a cone type hat made of felt or wool. And this type of hat was usually awarded to freed people. Like if they were enslaved and then eventually freed, or like they paid off some sort of debt, they were given this cap to represent that they were in fact free. And so everybody wore this hat during the festival to celebrate the liberty and free spirit of the holiday. Even enslaved people did not have to work during Saturnalia. They were allowed to participate in the festivities, and in some cases, they sat at the head of the table while their masters served them.
Oh, good for them.
Good for them. I mean, it's only for potentially 1 day, 3 days, or 7 days, depending on which emperor they were living under.
Yeah, I mean, it's not enough, for sure.
It is not enough, but I'm sure they had a good time. Gambling, which was normally outlawed, was allowed in public during Saturnalia. Some accounts say that you were only supposed to gamble for nuts and not money in order to, like, recreate the vibe of the Golden Age, but, you know, people were gambling for money. Are you kidding me? Just like...
People are still people.
People are people. Like, when you go to, you know, Domino Park in Miami and the tour guide's like, they're not gambling for money. Wink, wink. And it's like, you know they are. It's like, okay, so let me see. The little things that they would gamble with, the game was called Knucklebones. That's like the English translation. And I'm not even going to try to read you this Greek word. But essentially, they were like little pieces of some sort of like hard material that you would roll like dice or jacks. And as the name implies, knucklebones, they were originally made from the foot bones of a goat or a sheep, which was like an easily accessible material. Right. They were later fashioned from all sorts of material like wood, stone, and terracotta, but also fancier things like glass, bronze, gold, ivory, and precious gems. They remind me of, I cannot remember the name of them, but they're these little plastic things that we had like at the late 90s. And you could collect them and you would play them like jacks. They're kind of small and rectangular. Let me see if I can send you a picture of what a knucklebone looks like. Maybe you'll remember that you'll know what I'm talking about from the 90s. They're like, and they all had different colors and whatever. This is what they originally looked like in.
Oh, they almost look like gummy bears. But no, I don't know what you're talking about.
Right. They also look like potentially fallen out teeth.
Yeah. Interesting.
Oh, they're called Crazy Bones. Crazy Bones. Do you remember Crazy Bones?
Let me see here.
I'm sending you an eBay link to Crazy Bones. Oh,
yes. Yeah, I do. I do remember those.
I wonder
maybe
if
that's
they're
what those are
related.
based off of.
Yeah, they are so similar that I'm curious. I don't have the answer now, but the question has been asked, dear listeners. If you know anything about the history of Roman knucklebones and how they relate to American crazy bones, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. Yes. Anyway. Okay. So. Another thing that you would do during Saturnalia, households would appoint a mock king or a Saturnalius princeps, also known as leader of Saturnalia, or sometimes called the Lord of Misrule. Grace talked about the Lord of Misrule in one of her many pagan tradition topics. Essentially, This person was chosen to reign over everyone and give silly orders like telling someone to shout embarrassing insults, dance naked, or chase others around the house. Usually a lowlier member of the household was made this figure, and this figure was responsible for making mischief during the celebrations. The idea was that he ruled over chaos rather than the normal Roman order. And then the common holiday custom of hiding coins or small objects in cakes dates back to Saturnalia, because you would eat cakes, and if you found the thing in the cake, you could become the Lord of Misrule or the Saturnalius Princeps, which is something we still do for Mardi Gras, etc. Mm-hmm. Exchanging gifts was popular at Saturnalia. One writer, Marshall, described the gift-giving process as, quote, "At this time of the year, when the equestrians and senators show off their party clothes, and even the emperor wears a freedman's cap, accept the gift you have drawn, whether from a poor or rich man. Let everyone give his guest an appropriate gift," end quote. If you have been listening for a long time, I've also covered gift giving on episode 114, Dog's Gift to Man. I saw a couple references of like this Saturnalia tradition is similar to like a white elephant. Like you took whatever you were given, which is similar to white elephant, Pollyanna, Secret Santa, that kind of thing, which we still celebrate today. Some gifts you might receive on Saturnalia. fattened pigs, incense, turtle doves, glass cups, ivory knuckle bones, lamps, clay statuettes, a gold hairpin, golden rings. Gold rings are an interesting gift because in the Roman Republic, because at the time of the early Roman Empire, customs said that only like senators and the wealthy class could wear golden rings, but things started slowly changing, and it became a custom gift to give a golden ring at Saturnalia to somebody who might be moving up in the classes. They might not be in like the ruling class, but you could give somebody a gift of a gold ring. They were allowed to wear it, and then it like helped them move up in status, which I thought was pretty interesting.
It's interesting. Some of these are in the like on the first day of Christmas, like that.
Exactly.
Turtle doves, golden rings.
Exactly. Wax candles and oil lamps were also popular Saturnalia gifts. Wax taper candles called cerae were common gifts to signify light returning after the solstice. And wax candles were often placed as offerings on household altars to Saturn, especially during the final days of the festival. Drinking parties were an important part of Saturnalia. In the egalitarian spirit of the holiday, everyone, rich and poor, could partake. There was one account that I read that a particularly like thrifty scholar who like would not spend money, would not let his people off ever.
Mm-hmm.
For Saturnalia, made an allotment that everybody could have 20 cups of wine, which was like a huge thing for this person to do.
Yeah.
So I thought that was pretty funny. And then the traditional greeting of Saturnalia was Io Saturnalia, spelled I-O, and I read that there's two ways it could have possibly been pronounced, like E-O, like as two syllables, or one syllable. Godspeed, trying to figure out like yo, exactly. And I read it in a couple places. I couldn't really find out if this is true, but people think that E-O Saturnalia or Yo Saturnalia was a precursor to Ho Ho Ho, Santa's Ho Ho Ho, which I thought was pretty interesting. On the last day of Saturnalia celebrations, known as Sigillaria, many Romans gave their friends and loved ones small terracotta figurines known as signillaria, which was supposed to be a reference to older traditions of human sacrifice. And then one last thing, we talked about gift giving already, but gifting verses like poems and short writings was also a tradition. And it was documented by Catullus and Martial that this was something that people did. And a lot of people suggest that this gifting of verses was the precursor to Christmas cards. Maybe. Interesting. By this point, you're probably like already thinking like, is Saturnalia Christmas? Like, is Saturnalia Christmas? Yes and no. I mean, if you listen to Grace's topic from episode 67, you'll learn a little bit about like the Christian church's influence on pagan holidays, or like how they had to accommodate pagan traditions into Christian traditions to make the conversion of,
because people didn't want to stop celebrating these pagan holidays, but the church was like, no, you need to be Christian. So actually, in winter, that's when we have Christmas then, even though there's like no actual like reason. I mean,
right. Everything that I found
that is really the birth of Jesus or whatever happened in the winter.
Exactly.
But they
everything that we
chose
have
that date because it happens to be right after Saturnalia, and people celebrate then anyways. So they were like, "Oh, you're not celebrating Saturnalia now; you're celebrating Christmas."
Exactly that. And Constantinople, that was the time when Rome went Christian, and people celebrated Saturnalia for a while after, before like the full conversion took place. But like Saturnalia isn't Christmas like 100%. The church would adapt certain traditions that they felt were fine enough to adopt, or traditions that people just wouldn't give up, like potentially decorating the house in greenery. Grace, you actually talked about decorating the house in greenery on episode 67. You talked about the Lord of Misrule. Like, all of these things aren't just from Saturnalia. These sorts of traditions happened also at Cronia in summer for the Greeks. And there are other cultures that have very similar midwinter festivals. So all of these kind of traditions amalgamated into what we now celebrate as Christmas.
Well, just think at the time, like everything's dying. It's like bleak and sad outside, but evergreen trees obviously stay evergreen. So you bring them inside to kind of like liven up. People didn't want to give that up because they're like, no, winter's depressing. So I'm going to bring my evergreen inside.
And of course you need like a massive party. Like these people were drinking for 7 days straight and gambling with their knuckle bones. And like the poor, enslaved people were finally given some frickin' respite to like sit at the head of the table, because winter, especially for them, sucked. They didn't have like heat the way we did. They didn't have Netflix. Like they weren't watching like, what is the big
Harry Potter marathon?
Yeah, the Harry Potter marathon, the 25 Days of Christmas, that new Netflix show for the women love show. What is it called? It's all over TikTok right now.
The Ultimatum?
Ultimatum. That was like, it's not quantum. It's something like quanta ultimatum. They didn't have that. All they had was their ivory knuckle bones, their terracotta figurines, and their
wine.
freedman's cap. Exactly. And so that's Saturnalia. Yo-yo Saturnalia, or whatever it is.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well,
it's not exactly July, but Christmas in July much.
Right? Saturnalia in July, you could say.
Yeah.
Interesting. Crazy. Oh, those poor pagans.
Seriously, I want it to be Christmas time only because I like the vibe of the holiday. It's not necessarily
don't get too like ahead of yourselves. Let me enjoy summer for a second now. It's just starting to be warm. I'm going on my walks.
I know. It was cool this morning too though. So I'm in a hoodie and pants today, even though it's mid-June.
Right.
But that's Chicago for you.
Climate change.
And climate change.
Well,
another episode for the books.
Yeah. Thanks for listening, everyone. And if you want to talk to us about Saturnalia or Rorschach test, if you've ever taken one, then find us on Twitter at The Good Eve Girls.
Or Instagram at The Good Evening Girls.
Or TikTok at The Good Eve Girls.
And until next time, as always, keep curious and you'll find us here next episode. Bye, everybody.
Yes.
Bye.
Goodbye.